All right, I think we're live. I hope we're live. Oh no, I just dropped some shit. All right, boop. And we're live on Twitch. I'll have to pull that up also. Minimize. Mute. Watch now. And then I think we're good. Awesome. This way I can have both chats up going at the same time. Welcome to the channel. As always, I'm Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to talk about the Forge Fire recap. Forge Fire was a GT that a group of us went to in the north side of Chicago, a place called Niles, Illinois. Cool store called Pastimes over in one of the shopping malls up there. It was cool, man. It was real big space. That's one of the benefits of being in a shopping mall is that a lot of them are kind of empty, so they'll lease you some space for a good price. So that was pretty neat to kind of work with and see. So the TO, Gary Frank, awesome dude, did a wonderful job. Have a have a thing here, just a thing. He did a great job. You know, it was a well-run event. Everything was real smooth. Shout out to him and his son. They did a magnificent job. As always, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button. We're doing a giveaway in about 12 days here. I'd like to see if we can hit 300 subscribers. Unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna. So let's try and see how high we can get so we can do this giveaway. I'd like to give away that beautiful Umbral 6 model painted by Midwest Minis. There is a link in the description for the giveaway video, and also we'll show you guys a picture of it again at the end. And then big shout out to militarygamecommand.org. It's a nonprofit that I've been working with to reach out to veterans. I don't work for them, I just work in conjunction with them, reaching out to veterans, wounded soldiers, and sailors and the like, and using gaming to kind of build a community to help support these service members. Region Con is Friday. If you haven't registered, make sure you do. It's going to be a fairly small event, which is going to be kind of neat. And it's going to be a little bit more of a kind of like a throwback event for me, you know, kind of like a back to the roots type of deal where it's like we just have like, I don't know, 15 people, 10 people, and it's everybody's going to basically play each other. It's going to be pretty cool. I look forward to it. So let's dig into what everybody's really wanting. Round one, I'm not going to post the scores, but I am going to kind of walk you through them. Obviously, you can see my final. I don't know why that says 11. Let's make that say 100. So round one, I got Drukari, and I got them on Tide of Conviction. And so it's one of those where really I had every advantage here. Drukari's kind of a smaller army, although his list was pretty neat because it was a lot of Kabalites. It was, you know, some Venoms and Kabalites, and that was pretty much it. He did have Drazar, but between Drazar and his Succubus, that was it for his melee threat. So all I had to do was worry about his poison because he didn't even really have any blasters. So he just had a lot of poison. And fortunately, like I didn't have a ton of vehicles, but a lot of my high damage stuff was a vehicle, or it had at least like a 4-up save. So I wasn't just like 6-up or die against this stuff, you know. So it was good because I had a lot of bikes. I think the big thing here, I took behind enemy line, stomp them good, and good bits, and I maxed them all, obviously. And I think really what the big defining factor here was just that he really underestimated how fast my army could be, and just kind of overextended. And that was it. Other than that, he played well. He was a nice guy. We had fun. There's not a lot. Things didn't start to go wrong until round two, and it just went downhill from there. And we'll talk about why towards the end, you know. So round two was versus Space Wolves. It's actually my buddy Zach. We played Recover the Relics. I did lose that 63 to 83, and I mean, really, I was in the game until the last turn, and round yeah, it was round five is where he was able to make that jump because I just couldn't control any objectives at the end of the game. Like literally could control 0 objectives. So not only did he score more, I also only scored 0. And that's a pretty big swing, right? Like that drastically changes the outcome of the game. If I could have gotten him onto one objective and then controlled more, I actually ended up winning this game or tying. And so, like, that primary was the big thing. I took good bits, no prisoners, and behind enemy lines. And so my list is built for behind enemy lines. And what I found on the terrain, we used WTC terrain, and what I found was that I struggled to score that secondary simply because I just couldn't get past midboard in most of my games. Right? He took Warrior's Pride, no prisoners, Codex Warfare. I took Get the Good Bits, no prisoners, and behind enemy lines. And the difference in our score was literally just the primaries. So if I'd have just, you know, changed a few things, it was a very winnable game. And really what sealed the deal for me was that he went first and he pushed up a little bit. And I pushed my Coptas up. I dumped him into his Thunderwolf cavalry. I think I killed one. And then I charged my Coptas into his cavalry. And I really just thought through weight of dice I could, at least kill another one because they have a lot of attacks. And I also sent my battle wagon in. I used ramming speed. It was like a 9-inch charge. And with the reroll and 3 dice, I failed that charge twice. So failing that very makeable charge, and it's not 3 dice pick the 2 highest, it was 3 dice keep them all. So failing that charge twice, right? And then my Copta's just evaporating the Thunderwolf cavalry took a lot of my shooting off the table. And so that really, I think that was a mistake I made. I should have just bounced my Coptas up, shot, and then bounced them back rather than charge them into him. And that would have kept them on the table for another turn, and I would have had another turn with a bunch of rockets. So it's one of those where that was a mistake I made. I should not have taken that risk. I should have played it a lot more conservatively and safely. But I was really thinking if I could kill a couple more cavalry, one or two, I could at least weaken them, and then I could also start punching holes in his line so I could start getting behind there. And again, it didn't work out that way. Um, and because of the terrain layout, I was just getting blasted off the board with bolt guns. And like I said, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So round 3, I got Necrons on Data Scry Salvage. Space Necrons. Okay, G. That was real smart. I got Necrons on Data Scry Salvage. I lost that one 66 to 81. And again, I took, I need to make sure that's changed. There we go. I took no prisoners behind enemy lines and get the good bits. I scored 0 in behind enemy lines that game. Like I said, this is a list that I had built for behind enemy lines, but it was not built to interact with the terrain that we were using. And that's my fault. I should have looked more at the terrain, and I should have kind of thought about what I was doing. But it's one of those where responsibilities and time kind of prevented me from putting any kind of real research into it. I had no experience on this layout, and it was a good learning experience. So the next time I go back, I'll be much more prepared. I took no prisoners behind enemy lines and good bits, and the difference was effectively behind enemy lines, right? If I had have capped that, we tie. And I was 4 points behind on primary. So that, again, like for the most part, the games were close. They were tight. It's just bad secondary picks, right? It's just one of those where I should have kind of picked some different secondaries after I realized I wasn't able to get behind enemy lines. And it took me a couple games to kind of think about that and realize it. Again, it was a bad take. I couldn't push past mid board. It's as soon as I hit the middle of the board, I was just getting shot off the table, and that was every game. There was just nothing I could do about it. And the other thing is that super nice dude. I'm not gonna name drop him, but he was a super nice dude. But he made an egregious error with his rules that drastically affected the outcome of the game. He had the Silent King around the middle of the table, and I asked, he was like, "Hey, Silent King fights first at the beginning of my turn," because he knew I was going to charge it, right? Like it's pretty obvious. And I was like, "Oh, okay, so he fights first." I can work around that because if I charge him with multiple units, if I just fight with my bike first, I should be able to do enough damage that it'll at least cripple him and reduce his attacks. So I do my whole turn. I go through the movement, I go through the shooting, I charge him, and he's like, hey, just a reminder, he fights first. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine. He can fight first, but I'm going to fight with my bike. Because if he fights first and I fight first, then I just get to pick him. We alternate. I'm going to fight with my bike, and we're just going to swing my attacks here. And he was just like, no, but he fights first. And I was just like, bro, I understand what that means. I'm telling you, this is how that works. So then he pulls up the Silent King's datasheet and shows it to me, and I was like, dude, he doesn't fight first. He makes me fight last. There's a huge, huge difference between those two rules. And he was like, well, we can, what do you want to do, man? Like, I didn't realize it. And I broke it down. Like, I sat there and I explained to him why it's important to know the difference. Uh, and he's like, what do you want to do? He's like, you can take back the charge. And I'm like, no, it's fine because at this point, my whole turn would have been drastically different. And so, like, it is what it is, buddy. Like, oh well. So I ended up picking up a lot of stuff. He knocked my bike boss down to 1 wound. He basically killed a whole unit of squig hogs and then killed like half my storm boys. And it's one of those where it was just like, just because, you know, I didn't follow up with him on that rule, and it did. It drastically affected the outcome of the game because it was because what ended up happening was my bike boss ended up going down to 1 wound. He fought, and then I knocked the Silent King down to 8 wounds. So not only do I kill the Minears, I also bracket him. So now we're talking about a lot lower damage output. So it's like, all right, uh, kind of a drastic difference, right? Like knowing the outcome of that fight, I would be able to really hamper his damage output, and there's a good chance. There's not necessarily a good chance I kill him, but there's a good chance I put even more damage onto him, and I have a lot more on the table in engagement range with him at the end of that, rather than just like, all right, I just pick up everything. So I was really frustrated at the time. I wasn't mad. It's one of those where it is what it is. We move past it. I think he realized how how big of a deal that was. Like he was very apologetic, and like I said, he was super nice. And I was just like, man, it's all right. Like I'm not doing that well anyway. This isn't the end of the world. Whatever. Uh, but like I said, behind enemy lines, and I just couldn't push past midboard, and that was every game. Every game for the most part. Once I got past midboard, I just died. Round 4, I hit Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights is arguably just a rough matchup anyway, uh, because of the leadership debuffs and the dread tests, right? Because orcs really got hammered in the leadership department, and you couple that with the fact that just like, man, again, soon as I get past midboard, uh, I died. You know, I took Bring It Down in good bits. I didn't score, I think, anything on good bits either. It was just I would have been better off doing like banners, right? Or something, and then just sitting in my deployment zone. And honestly, so my last round, I was like, okay, let's change it up a little bit. And honestly, if I'd have done that in this game, I'd have done a lot better. Instead of behind enemy lines, maybe take Green Tide, and then instead of good bits, maybe take banners. And I just sit in my deployment zone, and I'm just like, cool, pass turn. I'm gonna sit here and score points pass turn. You know, I don't like playing that way, but really, like I said, it was just a bad terrain layout for what I brought. I just didn't have the right tools in my toolbox to kind of overcome what was happening. And then round 5, I hit Custodes on tear down the icons, and that was another loss. So I went 1-4. You know, it was just a really bad outing for me. It was again the only game that wasn't really close until the end for me was the Chaos Knights game. And this one was basically tied up until turn 5. And what I ended up doing in this game, let me pull it up. What I ended up doing was I changed my secondaries. And I took Green Tide, I took Raise the Banners, and I took No Prisoners. And I took No Prisoners just because I don't have a good secondary matchup into Custodes, right? Like, I'm not going to take Stomp 'em Good because they fight better, right? They have better saves, everything's better. And I'm not going to take Grind because I have more units. So it was just like, all right, we're going to take No Prisoners and at least just get points for playing the game. I got 8 points on Green Tide, and basically all I did was just hide a couple of units of Gretchen in corners for screening and just farmed points. Like, cool. I'm at least getting 8 points here. I took banners and basically did the same thing, got 8 points there. I took no prisoners, and I got 6, and I only got 28 in primaries. And again, it just came down to the fact that as soon as I touched an objective because of the terrain, he could just shoot me off with his bolt guns. So it was just very rough. Like I said, the tournament used WTC style terrain. My list was not built for that. We're going to talk about it in a minute. I got some pictures pulled up. We get to have some drawing time. We're not going to go through every mission, but we are going to go through the 3 different layouts. And then the terrain definitely favors shooting, infantry, and the fly keyword. And those are 3 things that my army, well, those are 3 things that my list didn't really have for the most part, but there's one of those things that my army just doesn't really have, and that's the shooting. Everybody was super nice, and I did have a really good time, even though I didn't do well. And big shout out, Alex went 4-1, got best Xenos, and then Zach went 3-2. So in Austin, he was sitting right there. He was in the 2-win gang instead of the 1-win gang. But again, his list was just not meant to work around this terrain. He brought a couple land raiders, and because of how the terrain's laid out, he had a hard time maneuvering them. So let's take a look at this real quick. Let's find a pencil. All right. So this one is tied to conviction, and I probably shouldn't have really use this one, right? But we've got our deployment zones here, and actually they're already on the board. You can see them here, and you can see them here. All right, so if you see these are forests. So they're difficult ground, -1 to shoot through, right? But if you look, like you have a lane here. You have a lane here. You can shoot all the way across here. You can shoot all the way across here. Yeah, you'll take a -1 to hit, but it turns out when everything hits on 3s except for your army, it's not that big of a deal, right? You can shoot basically here, and then, and I'm pretty sure I'm just kind of like doing all the lanes at this point. So interestingly, you also have this one here. So there's a lot of shooting lanes. These right here are L-shaped ruins. So like my bikes had to go around it. Now that we've seen the shooting lanes, right, my bikes had to go around it. So like if I had a unit of bikes here, I had to go around and around rather than, like if I wanted to hide them, I could put them here. But then in order to get out, I have to go around. And then if I want to go through the woods, lose 2 inches and there. If I want to go the other way, I've got to go around and hope I can make it here, right? So it's one of those where bikes were not the play, and that's fine. Every advantage that they granted me on like a GW board was just stripped away on this table. And that's nothing wrong with the table, right? That's just I did not have a list designed to interact with this terrain the way I should have. This one was the last 2 rounds of day 1. So this would have been recover the relics, the longboard mission. Yeah, we can see that. Cool. Let me actually zoom it out a little bit. There we go. That looks a little bit better. So this was the longboard mission, right? And then whatever we did after that, I forget. Well, that's pen. I don't want pen. I want pencil. So again, if you look here, you've got this lane here, right? you actually have a firing lane here. It's really big shooting lanes. Like this layout, right? So like, and don't get me wrong, had I had a list that was built to interact with this a little bit better, I probably would have done a little bit better. But there's not a lot of hiding places, and the hiding places there are really want you to either have the infantry keyword or the fly keyword or both. So it's one of those where the bikes just they did not do me any favors, right? Because I couldn't run them up the side of the board where there's no terrain because that's just a massive firing lane. Firing lane. So you can go from here to here to here to here. So you have all these corners of the board with massive lanes that go all the way around the board, and then you couple that with the fact that like I can also go across the middle of the table here to shoot. I can go across the table here to shoot. So it's one of those where like if I'm holding the objective, I've got to have infantry, right? I can't use bikes because then when I need to push past the middle of the board, I'm just out in the open. There's nothing I can do. And so that was my experience with this. We hit Data Scry Salvage, which is actually, this was the Necron player one. There's one right about here, one right about here, one right about here, one right about here, and then there's one like here and here, right? So if I'm holding this objective up here, he can just shoot me from there. And if I'm back here, that's fine. But then when I need to move up to this one, I have to go around everything. So again, it's not that the terrain was bad. It's that I just wasn't built to interact with it in a meaningful way. And then the last round, right? The last two rounds, Chaos Knights and the other one. I don't know. Doesn't matter. My brain's just not processing it right now. Chaos Knights and Custodes. So like I started with my commandos here, okay? And it was just like because he had movement, he could just advance and then the next turn charge. And there wasn't much I could do about it, right? Like it is what it is. I did have some units hiding here, but again, we've got these lanes, and his list had a lot of shooting in it. We've got these lanes. So all these people are people who have played on these terrain formats before. So we've got from here, we can go all the way through to here. I see this overlap here, but you can actually tweak it a little bit. From here, you can actually go all the way through to here. From here, you can go all the way through to here. And don't get me wrong, like I said, there's nothing wrong with the layout. It's not a bad layout. It's just very different than what I'm used to. So the fact that I lost most of the games didn't surprise me. And really, I did a pretty good job of staying as competitive as possible throughout every game. The Custodes game, like I said, I just couldn't hold objectives. Because the other thing to note is that these have windows. So if you're touching them in any capacity, if you have line of sight, you can be shot. So really, like if you're touching this, you've unlocked a whole lot of the table for shooting because you can go here, you can go here, and I know my lines aren't perfectly straight, but you get what's going on. You can go here, and you can go here. So you just have so many sectors of fire that unlock simply by touching one piece of terrain. So it just like I would get a unit up, and there's just nothing I could do. If I got it like here, well, I could just touch here and shoot you. I can touch here and make sure I can shoot you. I could come around here and make sure I could shoot you. So it was just like to just wasn't shit I could do. And really, round 5 was what I should have been doing the whole time. I should have just taken green tide, pushed my grots here, left some grots here, and then just sat there, right? Put a banner down here, put a banner down here, and then just sat there and just been like, cool, pass turn, pass turn, pass turn. Uh, it's one of those where it's kind of a shitty way to play the game, right? I don't play so that one person can interact with the game. I don't play so that I don't have to do anything. I don't want to play by not playing, right? That's not how I want to play this. So it's one of those where at the end of the day, like my secondary choices were bad simply because I just wasn't built to interact with the terrain. I did learn as we went through and started adjusting what I was doing, and that was important also. So if you do play on the WTC style terrain, hopefully you look at this little bit of talk that we just had and you can recognize like my mistakes and you can improve your game moving forward. All right. Look at this. Not that. That. Look at this. That is a giveaway. That is a gorgeous model. It is painted by Midwest Minis. Our link is in the description. Make sure you hit that link. Make sure you like that video. Make sure you're commenting and make sure you subscribe. I really want to give this away, so help me give it away. I want everybody to have it. It's super cool. But that's going to be it on this for now. I've got RegionCon, like I said, on Friday. I'm going to just take some models in case I have to play. And really, we're not going to fill every table. So if somebody shows up with some models and they want to get a game in, I will just play. But other than that, again, big shout out to everybody that went to Forge Fire. Got to see your boy Justin Curtis, super nice dude. I've had some great interactions with him. I work with him at Games Workshop on events. And Gary Frank did a magnificent job running the event. Pastime Games, big shout out to them because they don't have to host these events. So again, it's really cool. And then Alex, Zach, Austin had a great time. Before I close this, I do want to share a little Airbnb story because it's funny. So we got an Airbnb that was like, I don't know, 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away. It wasn't bad. The description, so first of all, it was very clean. I'm not taking away from the people, um, because again, everything was clean. Everything was as described. The first thing I want to say is like it did say it was a huge room, so it was a huge room with 2 beds, and we brought some air mattresses and stuff, because they said you could have up to 4 people in it. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I also have to remember that huge to Dirt Farmer Chris from Indiana is not the same as huge to people who live in Chicago, right? Like a huge room in Chicago is not the same as a huge room to me. So when we got there and I was looking at it and it was basically half the size of my current bedroom, I was just like, okay. But again, that's not their fault. And I also made sure I mentioned that in the review. Like, hey, this says huge. This is not huge, but that's my fault because I'm not looking at it from the perspective of somebody who lives in the Chicago area. I'm looking at it from the perspective of somebody who lives in Indiana, where our rooms and cost of living are drastically different. And so again, they're not malicious, they're not misrepresenting, just different perspectives create. And I did recommend that they just like give a square footage instead of just saying huge, but that's it. Other than that, um, poor Zach. Uh, so it was a single room. There were 4 of those rooms. Each one had a lock, and then there was a shared bathroom and a shared kitchen area, right? And there was another lady there. I don't know, maybe 2 ladies that were sharing a room. I think I only saw one, but I got up. I always get up early, so I got up and I just was like, they had a coffee pot, but there was no coffee, so I was a little sad about that. So I just got up and was drinking some water and hydrating. And as I was doing that, right, I go to the bathroom, I do my stuff, I shit, shower, shave as I do, and then I walk in, and Zach's got to go to the bathroom. And I told him, I was like, hey, I think somebody's in there, so you might want to knock. So he knocks, and there's no answer. And our room is right next to the bathroom. So, like, I could hear him knocking through the wall. So I know you could hear him knock. It wasn't like he just, like, barely tapped on it. No answer. So he opens the door, and I just see Zach go, oh, and just immediately look down. So evidently, old girl also was taking a shower and didn't feel like answering. And poor Zach is just standing there looking at some naked lady who's just like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I knocked. I'm sorry." And he just shut the door. Ah, but it's just always an adventure. I love going out to events with these guys. They're a lot of fun. We have a good time. So, like I said, that's where we're gonna wrap up for now. Um, I've got Region Con. I may do like an RTT before the new edition because I know my boy down in Lafayette, Michael, is running one. Uh, so we'll see. We'll see. I'd like to get one more in. I don't like ending the edition for me on such a rough outing, but if I have to, I have to. And then I am doing the Tampa Open, which is in October, I believe. And then I may do one more GT this year. We will see. So I will be hopping back on in a little bit here. We're gonna do a health and wellness recap, right? We're gonna talk about my weigh-ins and stuff like that, but I want that to be two separate videos. So if you're interested, come check that out. That'll be up in about 10 minutes. Other than that, you guys have a great day.